you stopped thinking certain thoughts like, I can't, it's too hard, I don't feel like it, I'll never change. You had to make different choices, and the hardest part about change is not making the same choices the day before, and that means you're going to get uncomfortable. You stop doing the same things, the same habits, sitting on the couch, whatever it was.
You didn't have time to complain, that stuff.
You start staying away from the experiences with certain people and certain circumstances. You didn't want to live that anymore. And you had to really get beyond your emotional feelings and do it anyway. If you wanted to create a new personal reality, a new life, you would have to change your personality. And the first step in that is becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts, those thoughts that say, I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, it's my ex's fault, it's whatever. If you really truly wanted to be a happy person, you would have to stop complaining. You would have to stop blaming, you'd have to stop allowing your environment to control how you're feeling and thinking. And if you truly wanted to become a new personality, you would have to decide that the emotion of lack cannot belong in an abundant person. Oh, this is where the rubber hits the road now. Because how could you believe in a future that you haven't seen yet? And the end product of an experience in three-dimensional reality is called an emotion. And so most people wait for their wealth to feel abundant. They're waiting for their new relationship to feel love. They're waiting for their success to feel empowerment. They're waiting for their healing to feel wholeness or gratitude. That's the old model of reality. So then you got to trade that emotion of your past, and that story has got to go with it. And when you overcome your emotions, you master your creations. And that's freeing the body from the past. So the person who wants to become wealthy, they got to romance wealth.
Romance it.
They have to romance it, and you have to start thinking about how a wealthy person would think, how a wealthy person would act, how a wealthy person would feel, and you would have to become that personality, and that personality really should begin to create some change in your personal reality, the synchronicities that are not just parking spaces, not that stuff, but the bigger stuff that would stretch your belief so that when you see the synchronicity, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I created that. Is that possible that I actually created that? Now you start believing more that you're the creator of your reality instead of the victim of your reality, and that's the truth. And you cannot experience that truth unless you step in the realm of creation. And in order for you to arrive at that wealth, you have to make a very clear decision that that person who wants the wealth and who is in lack of having it is going to have to make a lot of changes to finally run into that goal or vision of their wealth. You can't create a new personal reality as the same personality. You got to become someone else. That means you got to give up some aspect of those unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that are programmed because we do them so much and think that way. And that's the hard part of change. When people do the work, I want to be really clear. They don't do the meditations to heal. They do the meditations to change. They understand that when I change, my body will change. My life will change. That's the experiment they're involved in. So this energy, this feeling that you have, the fundamental question is, when you leave this place, can you take it with you every day? Could you remember this feeling, and could you bring it up on your own? Now you're becoming the creator of your life, because now you'll believe more in that future and less in your past. And then you'll default, just like we all do, but how many times do you have to forget until you stop forgetting and start remembering? That's called the moment of change. And that's catching yourself from defaulting seamlessly back to that old personality that has been programmed for us to be victims. That if you say to someone, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so mad? Why are you so angry? Oh, it's that person, it's that circumstance that's causing me to feel this way and think this way. Well, that's an unconscious program. A person is saying that someone in their outer world or some condition is controlling. It's controlling their feelings, controlling their thoughts. Anything that's controlling us, we're victims to. And that's got to change. So then, to overcome victimization is worth more than all the wealth in the world. Because that's exactly what creates the wealth. That's exactly what creates the health. It's the overcoming process that is the becoming process, and that's how you arrive at that vision. And this energy is the energy that takes you there. And you got to be able to bring that up on your own. That means you got to come out of your resting state. And that when coming out of your resting state and not allowing or waiting for someone or something to do it for you, but doing it on your own, wow, there's sovereignty and there's empowerment in that. That's how any person arrives at their dream. They just don't let their energy drop. And if they do, they get back into that state again. And they earn the belief in themselves. How do you stay out of survival?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the question.
Stay out of it.
How do you stay out of survival? Because living in stress is living in survival. And stress is created when you can't predict something, you can't control something, or you have the perception that something's going to get worse, and there's an alarm system that immediately is built into our biology that causes us to get prepared for that threat or that danger. And that arousal then is an awakening, and the brain goes into the super alert state. And when we're in that state, now all of our attention is on our body, all of our attention is on our environment, all of our attention is on time, separation, right? So now we got to play by the rules of Newtonian physics, and that means you got to try harder, you got to work harder, you got to do something, you got to cheat, you got to steal, you got to do whatever a person does when they're in survival to take away the lack of what they're not having. And it could be anything for people, and it explains a lot of human behavior, because in that state of stress, in that state of survival, nobody's important but you. You become very self-involved, very self-indulgent. It's all about self. And then there's a story that goes along with that. So there's no easy answer for the person who's lost everything except get over the emotion. Because if you can't get over the emotion, you can't get past that problem. And justified or not, valid or not, the only person that those chemicals, those emotions are hurting are you. And it's dysregulating your autonomic nervous system. And people become addicted to the arousal of those emotions. And just like anything, you can have a bad trip or an overdose, and you could actually knock your brain and body out of balance just by thinking. Literally, you become addicted to your own thoughts. And the long-term effects of that push the genetic buttons that create disease. The stronger the emotional reaction you have to some experience in your life, the higher the emotional quotient, the more you pay attention to the cause. And the moment the brain puts all of its attention on the cause, it takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. So long-term memories are created from very highly emotional experiences. So what happens then is that people think neurologically within the circuitry of that experience, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And so when you have an emotional reaction to someone or something, most people think that they can't control their emotional reaction. Well, it turns out if you allow that emotional reaction, it's called a refractory period, to last for hours or days, that's called a mood. I say to someone, hey, what's up? You say, I'm in a mood. Well, why are you in a mood? Well, I had this thing happen to me 5 days ago, and I'm having one long emotional reaction. If you keep that same emotional reaction going on for weeks or months, that's called a temperament. Why is he so bitter? I don't know, let's ask him. Why is he so bitter? Why are you bitter? Well, I had this thing happen to me 9 months ago. And if you keep that same emotional reaction going on for years on end, that's called a personality trait. And so learning how to shorten the refractory period of emotional reactions is really where the work starts. So then people, when they have an event, what they do is they keep recalling the event, because the emotions of stress hormones, the survival emotions, are saying pay attention to what happened, because you want to be prepared if it happens again. Turns out most people spend 70% of their life living in survival and living in stress, so they're always anticipating
the worst case scenario based on a past experience. And they're literally, out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field, they're selecting the worst possible outcome, and they're beginning to emotionally embrace it with fear. And they're conditioning their body into a state of fear. Do that enough times, the body has a panic attack without you. You can't even predict it because it's programmed subconsciously. So then you say to the person, why are you this way? And they'll say, I am this way because of this event that happened to me 15 or 20 years ago. And what that means from a biological standpoint is that they haven't been able to change since that event. So then the emotions from the experience tend to give the body and the brain a rush of energy. So people become addicted to the rush of those emotions, and they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their limitation, so at least they can feel something. So now when it comes time to change, you say to the person, why are you this way? Well, every time they recall the event, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event is occurring, firing and wiring the same circuits and sending the same emotional signature to the body. Well, what's the relevance behind that? Well, your body is the unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between the experience that's creating the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. So the body's believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so then when those emotions influence certain thoughts, and they do, and then those thoughts create the same emotions, and those same emotions influence the same thoughts, now the entire person's state of being is in the past. So then the hardest part about change is not making the same choices you did the day before, period. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, because it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. We keep firing and wiring those circuits, they become more hardwired. So you have a thought and then the program runs. But it's the emotion that follows the thought. If you have a fearful thought, you're going to feel anxiety. The moment you feel anxiety, your brain's checking in with your body and saying, yeah, you're pretty anxious. So then you start thinking more corresponding thoughts equal to how you feel. Well, the redundancy of that cycle conditions the body to become the mind. So now, when it comes time to change, the person steps into that river of change and they make a different choice, and all of a sudden, they don't feel the same way. So the body says, well, you've been doing this for 35 years. You're going to just stop suffering and stop feeling guilty and stop feeling shameful, and you're not going to complain or blame or make excuses or feel sorry for yourself. Well, the body's in the unknown. So the body says, I want to return back to familiar territory. So the body starts influencing the mind, and it says, start tomorrow. You're too much like your mother. You'll never change. This isn't going to work for you. This doesn't feel right. And so if you respond to that thought as if it's true, that same thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience, which will produce the same emotion. Your body is your unconscious mind. In a sense, if you're sitting down and you start thinking about some future worst-case scenario that you're conjuring up in your mind, and you begin to feel the emotion of that event, your body doesn't know the difference between the event that's taking place in your world, outer world, and what you're creating by emotion or thought alone. So most people then, they're constantly reaffirming their emotional states. So when it comes time to give up that emotion, they can say, I really want to do it. But really the body is stronger than the mind because it's been conditioned that way. So the servant now has become the master. And the person all of a sudden, once they step into that unknown, they'd rather feel guilt and suffering because at least they can predict it. Being in the unknown is a scary place for most people because the unknown is uncertain. People say to me, well, I can't predict my future. I'm in the unknown, and I always say the best way to predict your future is to create it. Not from the known, but from the unknown. What thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? What behaviors do you want to demonstrate in one day? The act of rehearsing them mentally, closing your eyes, and rehearsing the action.
Rehearsing the reaction of what you want, or the action?
The action of what you want. By closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing some action. If you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between what you're imaging and what you're experiencing in 3D world. So then you begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like the event has already occurred. Now, your brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. And if you keep doing it, priming it that way, the hardware becomes a software program. And who knows, you just may start acting like a happy person. And then I think the hardest part is to teach our body emotionally what the future will feel like ahead of the actual experience. So what does that mean? You can't wait for your success to feel empowered. You can't wait for your wealth to feel abundant. You can't wait for your new relationship to feel love, or your healing to feel whole. I mean, that's the old model of reality, of cause and effect, waiting for something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. And when we feel better inside of us, we pay attention to whoever or whatever caused it. But what that means then is that from the Newtonian world, that most people spend their whole life living in lack, waiting for something to change out there.
What do you mean the Newtonian world?
The Newtonian world is all about the predictable. It's all about predicting the future. But the quantum model of reality is about cause and effect. The moment you start feeling abundant and worthy, you are generating wealth. The moment you're empowered and feel it, you're beginning to step towards your success. The moment you start feeling whole, your healing begins. And when you love yourself and you love all of life, you'll create an equal. And now you're causing an effect. And I think that's the difference between living as a victim in your world, saying, I am this way because of this person or that thing or this experience. They made me think and feel this way. When you switch that around, you become a creator of your world, and you start saying, my thinking and my feeling is changing an outcome in my life. And now that's a whole different game, and we start believing more that we're creators of reality.